Felt like my life was over. Fear for the future, constant symptoms, no disease progression. MS was the best thing to ever happen to me. 7 years ago, in my early 20s, I was diagnosed with MS. And I genuinely, at that point, felt like my life was over. Today, I forget that I even have it most days. If you are anything like me, your brain probably went to the worst case scenarios. So I'm gonna walk you through my full experience from my first symptom to diagnosis, to medication, and to where I am now. If you've seen my other videos, you probably know I live a pretty full and normal life now. Though it's definitely not perfect, but I travel, I'm planning a wedding, I'm considering an international move. So I'm really happy to say that MS is just one part of my story and not the whole picture. Let's go way back to the beginning to where it all started. I was 22 and I had just moved to Toronto, and I actually had just gotten my first job downtown as a server. I had had no prior symptoms until one particular weekend in April 2019. I remember it started with my eyes just feeling like extremely tired. Like looking at things from eye level was really hard. So I found myself like looking down at the restaurant table, looking up at the TVs at the restaurant. And I remember just having a really hard time and thinking like, am I just like really tired? I even remember at one point driving through an intersection and I felt very like discombobulated, like something wasn't right and like something with my perception was strange. I thought maybe it was just like a weird moment and didn't think too much of it. So the Monday after that weekend, I remember waiting for the streetcar and I was looking at signs on the road. And I remember it being like a little bit blurry, but again, I didn't think much of it because like that's happened before. I got on the streetcar and I got off downtown Toronto. This was my first full week at this new job and I wanted to try a shortcut by going into the Path, which is like Toronto's underground network system. There's like shops and all kinds of things in there and people like use it for commuting and shopping and whatever. So I was like, okay, let me go try to find my job through the Path because there's like an outside and an underground entrance. I go into the Path and then I go down the stairs and all of a sudden I notice that there is two of everyone and everything. I remember like blinking a million times, like, am I okay? Like, do I just have something in my eye? And like trying to navigate my way around and find where I was going. I realized I was going in circles and like that something wasn't okay. So I found my way back up to like street level and I called my manager and I was like, I can't come in. I don't know what's wrong with me. I need to like go to a doctor. I had a little bit of like a cry on the phone because I was feeling really overwhelmed. And I go back down into the Path because I saw on the map that there was some sort of like walk-in clinic. But I went to the walk-in clinic and I actually got seen pretty quickly. I just remember they had me do a bunch of like eye tests, like where you kind of like cover one eye, reading like the eye chart. They're like, you're following their finger, whatever. And I remember like crying out in the open because I was trying to read the eye chart and all of the letters were like moving around. At that point, the doctor had said, I think you need to go to the ER and get checked out there because we really don't know like what this could be and we need to rule out anything more serious. So I ended up getting myself back to street level and on a streetcar. And mind you, we had just moved to Toronto the month before. And this was actually, I think, my first time taking the streetcar by myself and navigating downtown Toronto by myself like this. And so I got back on the streetcar, went back home. My now fiance left work to come to meet me, which I'm so grateful for. And we went to the hospital together. Again, it was another situation of some eye tests. They did have me do a CT scan just to rule out anything that could be like very obviously dangerous, but they didn't find anything. And I think I ended up being sent home with like some sort of like anti-inflammatory medication. And I was told to come back in a few days if it didn't get any better. And after a few days, it didn't get any better. So I went back to the hospital. I went to a different hospital this time. I got seen again and they actually almost admitted me, but they decided not to after they saw the MRI results. They had me do an MRI while I was there and they decided to set me up with a neurologist instead. So I got to go home, got booked in to see the neurologist. It was a couple weeks later. So I had to live with like the double vision for a little while. So I saw the neurologist and he was the first person to say to me that it looks like multiple sclerosis. And I just remember at that time, I think I didn't really know what multiple sclerosis was. And I definitely thought immediately of ALS and some of the, what I would deem to be like a little bit scarier diseases and illnesses and things like that. But at that point I was like super in denial and I was like, no, there's no way. So I don't know. I just like took that information and I think he had me scheduled for like another MRI, but this time of the spine. He also told me I could get in for a spinal tap, but I actually chickened out on the spinal tap. Just like really wasn't interested in doing that. Some time goes by and things do keep progressing. So I see him again in November, and he confidently said, I mean, as confidently as you can say with an autoimmune disease, it does look to be multiple sclerosis and we should be treating it as such. I think like the reason that I was in denial is because at that point in my life, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. I didn't have a great relationship with food and my body. I was just like dealing with a lot of like emotional trauma. I was like, no, I think my body is just like reacting to all of that. And if I can improve like my life, my lifestyle and my anxiety and all of that kind of stuff, then like it'll probably go away. And then this is when it got really hard for me. The rest of 2019 was really challenging because when they say that the first year after your MS diagnosis is the hardest, I definitely found that to be true. Back to the double vision. This started in April and it actually lasted until I think like the end of June or so. And I found out that is what they call optic neuritis, which was basically an inflamed optic nerve that was causing double vision. I even remember I traveled with it to San Francisco. I was able to like cover or close one eye and see clearly, like see one of everything. So I just remember like wandering San Francisco sometimes by myself with like one eye closed so I could see just one of everything. Like so bizarre thinking about it back then. Over the months after that, I developed some more symptoms or flare-ups as they were called. I had a lot of like spasticity in my arms and legs. It's really hard to describe what the feeling was like, but I do actually have videos on my channel from more real time, which I will show you right here. This was like real time in the moment, like finding out I was diagnosed with MS and experiencing all of the symptoms and like flare-ups and stuff like that. And I go into it a lot more with like the real-time updates of things that were happening. Please feel free to check those out if you want to see a little bit more like in depth about that. I remember there was numbness in different areas like my fingers. I had like a patch of numbness in my face at one point, the back of my head at one point. I remember how weird it felt to brush my hair with that numbness. My whole like abdomen at one point felt numb. Another one was, I think they call it Lhermitte's sign. I'll put it on the screen here. Basically, when you bend your neck down, some people get like an electric shock through their limbs down to their feet. Mine is like a faint buzzing, but I still have it even now. It's not every single time I put my head down, but it's definitely still there. I guess that's like normal. These flare-ups like don't always 100% go away. And why this was so hard is because there were just so many things happening at once, like back to back, and sometimes at the same time, following each other. Like one thing would get better and then a new thing would come in. It was so scary to be like, oh my God, am I gonna be in like a wheelchair for the rest of my life? Like, what does this mean for my quality of life? Like, it was really scary, and all of the anxieties of the unknown and uncertainty definitely can get to you. Another one is definitely fatigue. MS fatigue is probably something that has like affected me the most, especially in the earlier years. I notice it sometimes now, and it's just kind of like this unexplainable, like bone deep, exhausted feeling, like your body's moving through quicksand. At least for me it is. It's not just like being tired. So when you tell people that you're tired or you're fatigued and they're just like, oh yeah, I'm tired too. And you're just like, no. Like, you don't get it. And that's one of the joys of an invisible illness. And yeah, so basically like all through 2019 and a few years after that, I was like constantly in and out of the ER, in and out of MRI machines. I cannot tell you how many MRIs I have had. Despite all of that, I was actually rated as a 1 out of 10 on the EDSS scale by my neurologist, which basically meant I was like still fully mobile, not really affected by the disease, and it had a very low impact on my day-to-day life, which was like a little hard to hear at first because it was like, but my body is doing bizarre things right now and it's really uncomfortable. But then at the same time, it was relieving to be like, okay, so like the outlook isn't too horrible or as scary as it seemed. Now let's go into medication. The first medication that I ever tried for MS was called Tecfidera. So my neurologist didn't want to put me on anything that was like too intense unnecessarily, because the more intense the medication, the more potential for side effects and things like that. And then he also didn't want to put me on one that was like too mild, that it wouldn't really do anything for me. So we came up with Tecfidera, which is a 2-pill system that you take 1 pill twice a day. And honestly, this was one of the most frustrating parts of my journey, like paired with all of the things that were running haywire in my body. I was honestly really not interested in starting a medication. I was still quite in denial, and I didn't want a medication that I was going to have to rely on for the rest of my life. But I obviously had to do what would be best for me. So we went with with Tecfidera, but unfortunately the side effects were actually like really prominent for me and were really difficult for me to live with. I would take my first pill around 11 a.m. with food, and then I would work my lunch shift. By the end of my lunch shift, I would literally look like a lobster. I would go bright red. I would be so itchy. My mouth would be so dry I could barely talk anymore, let alone eat lunch after that shift. I would sweat and I was like wheezing. Like I could feel the tension like in my throat. And then I would like have to like calm down and like ride it out for the next couple of hours before the dinner shift. And then I would take my next dose at night before bed to hopefully sleep through most of the symptoms, which I did. However, I would wake up in the middle of the night sometimes with the dry mouth, or I would be like clawing at the insides of my arms because they were just like so itchy and I was like just having constant allergic reactions or something. And even sometimes I would get like hives when I would wake up in the morning. So eventually I was like, I can't do this anymore. It's really affecting my quality of life. And I wanted to give myself a chance to like heal myself naturally. So I spoke with my doctor about coming off of medication, and I did come off medication for a while. And we just said like, we'll just keep monitoring this. We'll do my MRIs, like contact him if anything changes. So I think I stopped Tecfidera like before the summer. And at that point it was 2020. We were in the depths of the pandemic, and I was really prioritizing like my health and wellness, though I was still struggling a lot with a lot of things. But I was like really into exercise. Again, on my channel, I did do lots of like fitness challenges and like lots of what I eat in a days and all of that kind of stuff because I was like really into it at that point. And I was like really trying to improve my anxiety. I was really trying to just like work on my stress responses. One thing that I didn't expect with this diagnosis was that when you tell people, everybody and their mom has heard about MS and knows somebody with it and has like a diet recommendation for you. So I read a lot of books. I learned about a lot of diets. And after a while I realized like all of the diets were kind of contradicting each other. Like some people say to like go vegan, some people say to go paleo. There's like the Walls protocol, all of these diets. Eventually like I kind of broke down because I was already having a disordered relationship with food. I read so many books about healing your life. I watched so many documentaries. I learned that stress actually had a bigger impact on it all than anything I was doing or eating. And honestly, because of this discovery, it actually was a huge factor in how I've been able to mostly heal my relationship with food now at this point, because I realized like the stress I was feeling about food was worse than the actual food itself. And that was like a huge click in my brain that set me down a path of healing my relationship with food. So after a while, I was unfortunately still having flare-ups and symptoms, and my MRIs were still coming back with signs of progression. So we decided it was time for me to give medication another try. We did a lot of research together again, and I really like carefully reviewed my options. Interestingly enough, right at this time, a new medication was released, which is called Kesimpta. Kesimpta is a once a month auto injector pen medication. Basically, I receive a delivery once a month that is in like a cooler box with all these ice packs, and I receive a return shipping label with that box. I store my Kesimpta in the fridge and I take it myself at home once a month. I just have to use like a little alcohol pad to wipe a spot on my thigh. That's personally where I do it. It looks like an EpiPen if you've ever seen one of those. You basically just like push it on your thigh and then the pen like comes out, and it's like a tiny little sting, nothing crazy. My partner does it for me sometimes. I do it myself sometimes. Starting Kesimpta marks the time period when I finally started to feel normal again. I feel really grateful because I had basically no side effects with Kesimpta at all. Still to this day, I'm on Kesimpta and I have no side effects. I think at the beginning of Kesimpta, it was like a 4-week ramp up period where you have like a smaller dose and you do it weekly, something like that. I think I remember I'd feel like a little flu-like the next day, but then after the ramp up period, every month when I do my Kesimpta, like I don't feel any kind of come down in terms of like my immune system or anything like that. And I don't feel any side effects after I take the Kesimpta. I do also take it right before I go to bed as well. So, but I'm pretty sure nothing's happening while I'm sleeping. It's honestly like very simple and straightforward for me. I've been taking Kesimpta for about 3 years monthly now, and I'm not saying it's 100% the reason that I basically forget I even have MS, but I do think that it is a massive tool in my healing tool belt, if you will, that honestly came along at like the perfect time for me. So during the time that I was off medication between Tecfidera and Kesimpta, I actually did seek a second opinion. I don't remember which service I used, but I just found it online, and it actually went through some US MS, like MS specialists. I gave them all of my medical history, like all of my prior scans, basically everything that I could get access to. And unfortunately, the second opinion did confirm that it's very likely that I do have multiple sclerosis. So at that point, I went back to my neurologist and told them about this, and they decided to actually refer me to the MS clinic in downtown Toronto. So now I see an MS specialist. So while on kesimpta, my symptoms had quieted a lot. I was going from like sometimes monthly MRIs to MRIs every 6 months. And now I'm at the point where I only get an MRI once a year, and I see my specialist once a year following that appointment, just so we can talk about the results and he can check in with like my mobility and see like how my body's actually doing. I'm really happy to say that I have had multiple years in a row now where there has been no disease progression in my MRIs, and I have had no flare-ups or relapses. So no symptoms, no lesions, and all of that contributes to why I honestly forget that I have MS until like my medication gets delivered, or it's medication day, or I have to actually go to these annual appointments. So even better than that, I do actually have to get blood work every 3 to 4 months just to make sure that everything's going well with the medication. There was a point where every single time I got my blood work done, I remember seeing that a bunch of them would say high beside the level. And my doctors would always say like, oh, don't worry about that. You're only just slightly above the normal range, and there's just so much that goes into it, like don't worry about it. But I always felt kind of like, I don't know if I like agree, because I can feel like the deep fatigue in my body, and I still feel like something feels wrong and off, and it has to be related to this blood work, because it was like my white blood cell count, it was my monocytes, all of the markers of like inflammation. So, and obviously MS is a disease that comes along with inflammation, so it made sense. But because of my prioritization of building a healthy lifestyle for myself, where I'm really working to improve my stress, I've been working with a therapist for like the past 3 years this summer and done a 180 with my anxiety. My eating habits have changed a ton. My relationship with food is basically healed, I want to say. My relationship with exercise and my body, and like just in general, my quality of life and my prioritization of a healthy lifestyle has increased so much, and I started feeling so much better. I have more energy, more capacity for things. My nervous system is so much calmer. I can handle a lot more. Feel like a ball of energy most days, and the fatigue pretty much never gets me. I actually just did my recent blood work results, and they all came back with none of them saying high. And that is crazy, because it was 6 or 7 years of me seeing high on like multiple of the markers and being told like, oh, it's fine, it's not a big deal. And now that I've made this like huge lifestyle shift, which has taken years, by the way, it wasn't just overnight, I was all of a sudden like healthy. It has taken me years to figure out like what works for me, and I'm still working on that, but it's all been like in a positive trajectory towards my healthiest self. To first of all feel it physically, that I've been feeling better than I've ever felt, and then to see that reflected in my blood work after, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten my blood drawn in the past 6 to 7 years, for it to finally, for the first time, show no high levels just validated the way that I was feeling. And I knew that there was some sort of correlation to the way that I was feeling with those blood work results, because as I finally, for the first time in my life, honestly felt better, the blood work now matches how I feel. So just like a crazy little like proof moment that your lifestyle really can impact the way that you feel, and that was like tangible proof for me. And this takes me all to where I am now. I am 29 years old, and if I compare my life from then to now, it's actually kind of crazy. Back then I was dealing with constant symptoms, fear for the future, like what kind of life was I gonna have as I got older. Now I have no daily symptoms. I see my specialist once a year, and I like genuinely forget that I have MS. Like I basically never talk about it. And I bet a lot of people in my life don't remember either, because I definitely don't act like I have it. And genuinely, I am the happiest, healthiest, calmest, most regulated version of myself that I have ever been in my entire life. I'm more strong, more capable. I can handle more physically and emotionally and mentally. I am able to challenge myself more. Before I would try challenging myself, but I would burn out immediately because the MS fatigue would hit. My body was just not able to handle, like even like slightly harder workouts, my body would freak out. Walking was extremely challenging for me sometimes because the heat could really get to you. Like heat exhaustion and things like that with MS is definitely like a known thing, but none of that gets to me anymore. And now I actually challenge myself in workouts and know that it's making me stronger and better able to handle MS, but it doesn't just happen overnight. Like it's all of the building blocks and all the things that I've done leading up to this point paired with my medication. So I don't think it's the medication alone, but I do think that the medication has been a huge factor into why I've been able to implement the healthy lifestyle changes that have gotten me here, if that makes sense. And like I said, this video is just one piece of it. So if you want to see how my life actually looks, how I'm actively moving through anxiety, body transformation, stress through planning a wedding, navigating real life, traveling a lot, enjoying the finer things in life, just like how I take care of myself and live in real time with an autoimmune disease. I share all of that in vlogs and other videos on my channel, so definitely feel free to check that out. Summing it all up, my MS journey was very abrupt. Most people say that it takes them years to ever get a diagnosis, so I'm so grateful that I had one symptom and immediately they knew what was going on with me. It was very scary and I questioned what my life would be like if all of my dreams could no longer come true anymore. Like, would I end up in a wheelchair? What would it look like to have kids? And those first few years were some of the hardest years of my life. And I'm also so grateful to myself for refusing to accept anything other than an extraordinary life, even alongside an autoimmune disease, because that determination has truly led me to the things that are working the best for me and led me to having a higher quality of life than I had even before my diagnosis. So not that I feel like MS was the best thing to ever happen to me, but it truly helped me with my understanding of myself and how my body works. And I feel like more connected to myself than I ever thought possible. Like, I'm still working on it day by day, and I have a lot of hope for the future and the type of life that I'll be able to live. And I think everything that I've learned has really given me my power back, and it's let me feel like I have even a tiny bit of control while living with a disease that is notorious for unpredictability and is not currently curable. So if you're watching this because you're newly diagnosed or someone close to you was, just know that yes, it can be terrifying, and yes, the first year can be really difficult, but it has not turned out to be the death sentence that I initially thought it was, at least for me. I think that there's just not that much information out there about autoimmune diseases, and everybody's experience with them is entirely different from somebody else's. And I obviously can't guarantee that your experience is going to be perfect and easy, and it's not going to be worse than my experience or better than my experience, because nobody can predict that. But all I can do is share my real experience and let this video be proof that maybe a life like this is possible for you too. It's not perfect, and sometimes I do still think, oh, is this a flare-up? Is this MS fatigue? And I still long for a life where I don't have to take a medication every single month. But if you would have told me that I would have a higher quality of life after my diagnosis 7 years ago, I definitely would not have believed you. I could go into depth about a lot more aspects of this journey, so please comment down below if you have any questions, if you want me to expand on anything. Also, if you have MS, please feel free to share your experience down below, because I'd love for this to be a space where we can all connect. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.